Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Good. Chatty group. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. Where's your daughter? Oh, okay, good, okay. Good. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see you all. Shabbat Shalom. A couple of announcements before we start. So this is going to be our last session for the season. Here's what you can go online and watch reruns if you want. They'll play all summer. Far out. Rashid. We will start again in September, okay? There will be Shabbat services, obviously, every Shabbos morning through the summer. One of the rabbis will be here, and that rabbi will be teaching Torah as part of the service, and you're welcome to come and join them. Please come in. But the Torah study will commence the first Saturday in September, which is September the 2nd. There you go. So we'll begin first, I think it's Labor Day weekend. So the first Saturday in September, we'll start over again, whatever Parsha that is, and we'll go through the whole year again as we did this year. Okay? Following our Torah study this morning, there's a lovely service in the sanctuary. Two nice kids are having their bat mitzvahs. Actually, one of the kids I married his parents, so it's her parents, so it's sweet. That's how old I am already. And this morning, Cantor Barron and our musician in residence, Asher Levy, are going to be presenting a new musaf, a musical musaf in the Sephardic tradition. We had a Sephardic Friday night last night, and they'll do the musaf this morning with instruments and a beautiful Sephardic musaf. Yes?
Rabbi Asher's performing on July 8th downtown.
Good. Where?
Near the Disney Hall.
On the sidewalk in front of the Disney. If you see him, would you please throw a quarter into the guitar case? The poor kid, what I pay him, he needs to do this on his side. So. Good, very nice, very nice. So there'll be musical musaf and this Torah study this morning, 20 minutes after service is over in the Zicklin Lieberman Youth Lounge. Yes, so that's assured as well. This summer we go on hiatus in the synagogue. There's daily minyan every day. There's Shabbos services every Shabbat. But there's nothing in July because all of us are pretty much away. In August, we're going to be doing a lecture series. And this year the lecture series is going to be about Jewish films. So we're going to show the films on Tuesday night, and we'll provide popcorn. And we're going to talk about the films on Thursday nights. So each rabbi is going to take one. The first week, Rabbi Hoffman is going to be showing Salah Shabbati, which is a wonderful Israeli film, right, about the founding of Israel. The second week, Rabbi Farkas is going to talk about The Godfather as a Jewish film, good Jewish film. I think just the first one, not all three. Okay. Yeah, see, the difference between those families and our families is we just kill you slowly. And in a Jewish family, it's never business, it's always personal, right? But otherwise, it's the same story. I mean, that's how it is, Yeah. So the third week is Rabbi Taff, and I don't know what he's doing. The fourth week is going to be a program. We're going to take the fourth week off, and the Judah Pearl Foundation is doing a program about journalism worldwide. And I'm doing the last one, and I think I'm going to do The Frisco Kid, which is one of my favorite Jewish movies. And we'll talk about Jewish San Francisco, and Jewish California, and Jewish America, and that sort of thing. So it's a fun lecture series for them. And then everything starts again in September. We all return in September. So thank you all for being part of the Torah study. It's been wonderful studying together. Today, before we finish, Doug would like to say Kaddish for his grandma. So before we finish, if you'll stay just one moment, and we'll say Kaddish with Doug all together. That's what a community does. So we are going to talk about Korach today. We're on page 860 in the Chumash. If you didn't get one, there's some in the room, I think. Or you can share with a nice friendly Jew. Did you find one? If not, you can have this one. Okay, here we go. The beginning of the book of Numbers has a special theme, has an ethos that you have to understand, because it's kind of remarkable that this is in the Bible. It's not what you'd expect to read. So what do we have in the beginning of the book of Numbers? You have the voice of the idealist. And in this case, it's played by God. God is the idealist. And God says to this people, I will make you free. You have been slaves now for generations and generations. You deserve to be free people. You are the children of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah. You're the children of great ones. You deserve to be free. I will make you free. And he takes them out of Egypt with signs and wonders and miracles, and they cross the Red Sea with signs and wonders, and they arrive at Mount Sinai, and God hands them truth. God reveals God's self to them. They see what every human being wants to see in life. They see the truth. They see God. They see that which is most real in the world. They see reality. And then after 2 years, they build a mishkan, a shrine to carry God with them. God lives in the middle of this community, and they begin the journey. And that's when everything falls apart. Because the book of Numbers is about the confrontation between the idealist's voice, who says, I will make you free, and the human voice, the voice of real people, who say, you don't seem to understand. We don't want to be free. To be free means to live with the uncertainty of an open future, and that drives us crazy. We want to know where we're going to be tomorrow. We want to know what life is going to be like tomorrow. We want warranties on everything. To live in the uncertainty of an open future drives people crazy. And they're willing to give up their freedom if someone will assure them that everything will be okay. And they're willing to give up. They give up their freedom. And that's why they're always saying, let's go back to Egypt. Because at least in Egypt, we knew where the next meal was going to come from. At least in Egypt, we knew we were safe. In Egypt, we knew where we were going to sleep. Michael, come and find a place to sit. Yeah. At least in Egypt, things were secure. Being a slave is a terrible thing, but it has one virtue. Every tomorrow is exactly like every yesterday. And people like that. They want to know, what's it going to be like? They want someone there to take care of them. People say to the idealist, to God, we don't want to be free, because when you're free, you got to take responsibility. You've got to care for yourself. You've got to step up. You've got to work at this. We don't want that. We don't want that responsibility. We want you to do it for us. We want you to provide. You provide the food, and you provide the water, and you take us across, and you tell us what to do. We don't want to revel in freedom. We would rather obey than to be free. People say to him, we don't want to be free because what you're expecting is us to change. The Bible, at the heart of the Bible, is this remarkable, revolutionary idea that human beings and human society is dynamic, that it changes, that you're moving from here to there. The whole story is a road story. You get that, right? You saw that, right? We're on the road. It's a journey. The road, the journey, is the most common, popular metaphor in all of Western literature. Think about how many books and movies in Western literature are about the road. The Iliad and the Odyssey, the road. The Wizard of Oz, the road. The Tolkien books, right? The Lord of the Rings is a road story. They're all road stories, right? Walt Whitman said, sang the Song of the Road, and Jack Kerouac wrote On the Road. Everything's on the road. Why is the road the most common metaphor? Because the road is a metaphor for human change, for the change of the human being and the change of society. It's not just that Dorothy is trying to get to the Emerald City and get home. Dorothy's trying to get to Dorothy. She's trying to become the human being she's meant to be. So she follows the yellow brick road. Joseph Campbell writes about this. And who does she meet? She meets the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion. She meets mind and heart and will. These are the three great elements of the human being in Greek philosophy. Right? Mind and heart and will. And she's attacked by the witch who tries to keep her from down that road. Right? Now, in the new version, in the modern version, in Wicked, it turns out she is the witch. It turns out the witch is the good guy. That's because that's postmodern philosophy. Everything that you thought was good is bad, and everything you thought was bad is good. That's postmodern philosophy. But the idea is the witch is really her. The witch is really the part of Dorothy that doesn't want to change, that wants to stay the naive child in black and white Kansas. Right? But something is pushing her forward toward the Emerald City, where she's going to discover her truth. And of course, in the movie version, what is her truth? Her truth is inside. It's not outside. You don't need a wizard to rescue you. You had it inside you all along. Remember Glenda? I know this stuff by heart because I study this. You know, I just want you to make sure that I'm an expert. Now it's getting warm in here, right? It is getting warm in here. Everybody agrees it's getting warm. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu come on.
Thank you.
V'tzivanu al kviat hamezug avir. Umayim. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it. This is a new system, and there's a thing on my phone to do it, but I don't have the phone because it's Shabbos, so we have to do it by hand. Who knows? All right. So, each of the episodes of it. Someone else has a phone. Each of the episodes of the of the book of Numbers, we're on the road, and we're trying to make progress toward the people we're meant to be. But there's this, the adversary, the obstacle. It's not external, it's internal. Right? Last week, it was fear. We got to the boundaries. Everything we wanted, it was right there for the taking. And yet there was something inside of us said, can't do it. We're not worthy of it. You can't do it. You can't do it because maybe we won't be deserving of it. Maybe we won't be able to do it. You can't. It's the artist who can't paint his masterpiece. Why can't he paint the masterpiece? Because he spent his whole life preparing to paint the masterpiece, and now he worries that when he paints it, it'll only be second rate. So he doesn't paint the masterpiece. Right? Doesn't paint the masterpiece because there's the chance that someone will look at it and say, that's your masterpiece. So better to be the artist, the young artist with potential, than the real artist who has actually painted something. Because the risk of putting yourself up on a canvas and putting that out in the world, right? The risk of creating the symphony and actually performing it, and people get to judge it. So we don't want to go. We said, no, thank you. No, we'll go back to Egypt. You imagine, they got to the boundaries of the promised land, and they said, let's go back to Egypt. Why? Because it's safe. At least there we knew what was expected of us. God knows what will be expected of us there in the new land. Who we will have to become to take possession of that land. We don't want to face that. Too scary. Too scary. Right? Just too much. I mean, I called my dad. I told you this. I called my dad on the night my first son was born, to wish him mazel tov. Tell my mother that she's a grandmother, and my dad got the phone. I said, Pop, what do I do now? Like, Pop, I don't know how to like Dad. I'm good at a lot of other things, and he laughed at me and he said, listen, it's two things you need to know. I said, what? He said, love the kid and listen to your wife. That's what he said. Honest thing. He said, now go to bed. It's late. So, how do you do that? How do you do that? So I told the story last week in the show. I've been a teacher my whole life. My first teaching experience, I was 13 years old. I was an assistant counselor in a Jewish summer camp, and they said, "You're teaching swimming." I said, "Really? Me? What do I know of it?" "No, you're good. You'll teach swimming." So they gave me the Red Cross booklet. They gave me 10 minutes of instruction, right? And they gave me a class of beginners, of 8-year-olds who would, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, little kids who had never. You ever teach a kid to swim? Yes. This is a marvelous human experience, right? Because the kid is terrified. Because if you're this big, a swimming pool, even 3 feet deep, looks like, the Pacific Ocean. And so you get the kid in the pool, and the kid's holding on to the coping, to the side, with, like with death grip. You see his white knuckles holding on. And you say to the kid, "I'm going to take 2 steps back. I want you to push off the wall and swim to me." And the kid says, "Are you crazy?" He has a more colorful way of saying it, but even at 7, you say, no, I'm going to catch you. Trust me. You can trust me. You can do this. Just push off the wall, put your hands in front of you, and I will catch you. I promise you. And the kid says, "No, I'm not going to do it." And there's this moment of truth, right? You ever done this? Yes. There's this moment of truth. When you say to the kid, "Let go of the wall, push off the wall, put your hands in front of you, glide through the water, I'll catch you." And the kid looks at you and he sizes you up and he decides, can I trust this guy? It's life or death. I mean, it really is life or death, right? So if you're lucky, the kid pushes off the wall, you catch him, you both start giggling out loud. Look what you did. Look, let's try it again, Now it's a game. Now we can do it. But that first time, because letting go of the side of the wall is too scary. That's what the Torah was about last week. Can you let go of the side of the wall and push off into something completely unknown? And the other one says, "I'll catch you, I promise you. You'll make it. You won't drown." Right? You won't drown. You're going to do it, right? That's why, by the way, in the Talmud, a parent has 3 obligations. You know this, by the way? Your obligation, for those of you who are parents or grandparents, you are not obligated to give your children cable television. Nowhere in the Holy Talmud does it say anything about that. Or Xbox, or PlayStation, right? You are obligated to teach them a trade so they don't starve, to teach them Torah so their soul doesn't starve. And what's the third thing? You teach a kid to swim. No, I'm not kidding. That's in the Gemara. Now think about that as a metaphor. You teach a kid to let go of the side of the pool and enter into the world and know that you will be caught if you try. That you won't drown. That's a beautiful metaphor for a parent's obligation. That was last week's drama. This week's drama is a whole nother. This is the Great Rebellion. This is the Great Rebellion. According to Rashi, to the great medieval commentator, this happens next. Very few of the Torah portions are actually in chronological order, but this one is. And what we have here really is not one, but 3 different rebellions. And the rebellions, you'll see what they're about. And the question of what are they rebelling about? What is the nature of this rebellion is the next sort of exploration of what holds us back from becoming free people. What is the resistance to being a free person? So we're on page 860. Everybody okay so far? It says, Vayikach Korach. The Hebrew doesn't begin with the word now. It just starts, Vayikach. Korach took. Korach took. That's an interesting phrase, right? Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi. They give us his genealogy. Michael, if you go into shul and just grab one or ask one of the maintenance people, get a few. I'll talk really slow, okay? Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi. Korach, the son of Levi. The son of Kohath, the son of Itzar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi. That makes him what to Moses? That makes him Moses' cousin. They're first cousins. Their fathers are brothers. Except that Korach's father was older brother. That might be a hint about what his problem is, right? But he's a Levi. He took, it says he betook himself. That's a midrash. Vayikach, he took. He grabbed Datan and Abiram. If you know the movie, that was Edward G. Robinson. Okay? Edward G. Robinson played Dathan in the movie. Yeah, you know. Yeah, Moses. Freedom, right? Yeah. What are you going to eat tonight, you know? It's just great. It's a great characterization, right? I'm sure that's what it was. This must have been his bar mitzvah parsha, right? Can you imagine Edward G. Robinson's bar mitzvah? Yeah. Today I am a man, yeah. With a cigar, you know. Don't you think that? Yeah, well, you know, it's a reform shul. What do you want? Yeah. Hey, wait. Sorry. He didn't like the cigar. How's that? Better? Sons of Eliaban, sons of Pelet, descendants of Reuben. All right, so you have a Levite, 2 chieftains of the tribe of Reuben, to rise up against Moshe, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community. 250 chieftains. Only Jews would have 250 chieftains, right? Right? Yeah, it's like, you know, with the old joke about Ben Gurion says to Johnson, you know, you're president of 200 million Americans and I'm president of 25,000 presidents, you know. Let's pass these out, right? So we have 3 different rebellions going on here. We have the rebellion of Korach. We have the rebellion of Datan and Aviram, the Reubenites. And we have the rebellion of 250 chieftains. And we can ask what each one of them wanted based on their identification, right? They chosen men of assembly, men of repute. They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, you have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them. The Lord is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation? Who died and made you king? Okay, now, does this sound familiar to anyone? Let's just for a moment put your finger here and come back with me to the beginning of the Moses story. Can you do that? Come all the way back to Shemot. Come all the way back to the beginning of the Moses story. Look on page 323, real quick. 323. You have to turn pages quick in this class. Right? Moses grows up in the palace as the son of the daughter of Pharaoh, as a prince of Egypt. Good name for a film. Sometime after that, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his kinsfolk and witnessed their labors. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. He turned this way and that, and seeing no one about, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Look at verse 13, page 8. That's page 324. 324. When he went out the next day, he found 2 Hebrews fighting. He said to the offender, why do you strike your fellow? He retorted, the guy he spoke to says back to him, who made you chief and ruler over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Now, what's ironic about that? He's talking to Hebrews, right? And he sees that an Egyptian was beating a Hebrew. That's morally offensive, but it's rational. It makes sense. Now he sees 2 Hebrews beating each other. Like, it's not bad enough that the Egyptians beat you, you beating each other. He's learning about us, about Jews. Right? I mean, he didn't grow up in a Jewish home. He grew up, in the palace. He doesn't know from Jews, right? And he's like, it's not bad enough what the Egyptians do to you. This is what you do to each other? What are you doing? And the guy looks at him and says, what? Who made you king? Now, what's ironic? He is the king. He's the prince. I mean, he's dressed like a prince, and this guy's dressed like a slave, and he says, like, who made you, you get a sense of what this is like? This is a hint. What is this a hint? This is a people that has a profound problem with authority. That's an understatement. It's a people because every authority, no matter how benign, looks like Pharaoh. This is a people with a profound problem with authority. Right? He's trying to save a guy's life, and then he turns to him and says something which is so bitter. You're going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian. He saved the guy's life, for God's sakes. He should be a national hero. But instead, that becomes the reason to hate him. You see how bitter this is? You see why Moses didn't want to come and save this people? You see what happens next? He flees to the land of Midian, where he stays for 40 years. And then when God finds him in the wilderness, remember what happens? When God finds him at the burning bush, and he says, I want you to go back and redeem my people. Look at page 332. Look at chapter 4, 332. Right? Moses spoke up and said, what if they don't believe me and don't listen to me? Is he afraid of Pharaoh? Nah, not really. Pharaoh he knows how to deal with. He grew up in the palace. Pharaoh's his stepbrother, right? Who's he afraid of? Jews. The Jew. What if they don't believe me? I mean, I'm going to come with God's power and redeem them, and they're not going to believe me. And he knew it. He knew it because he knew this. And you get an inkling of why he stayed in Midian for 40 years. He didn't want to be the leader of this people, right? He knew something. And all of a sudden now, all of that comes back in a roar. And now he's hearing the same words he heard. It's now some 40, 45 years later. They're telling him the same thing. Who made you king? Who made you king? And there's a chill, you know? He gets this chill because this is the one place he knows he can't. This is his inability. This is his disability. He's not good at confrontations. When he gets confronted, he either falls on his face or he kills somebody. In this Parsha, he's going to do both. You're going to see that. But he doesn't know how to answer back. He doesn't have that kind of ability to enter into an argument and answer back. He either gets silent or he gets violent. Here he gets silent first. With this, Moses fell on his face. I mean, there was a simple answer. God sent me. That's the simple answer, right? That's what he was told to say. But he loses it at that point, right? Then he speaks to Korach and he says, come morning, the Lord will make known who is his and who is holy and who will grant him access to himself. He will grant access to the one he's chosen. Do this, you Korach, all your band. Take fire pans and put fire and lay incense. And the man before the Lord, the man whom the Lord chooses, he shall be the holy one. You've gone too far, sons of Levi. All right, so we have 3 rebellions. What are they about? What's rebellion number 1? Use your imagination. What do you think Korach wants? Korach is a Levite. Korach is a Levite with better yichus than Moses. He knows he's not better than Moses. It's not really Moses' job he wants. You can tell that from what's going to happen here. This notion of fire pans, what's that all about? That's what priests do. Whose job does he want? Aaron's job. Why does he want Aaron's job? Why would anybody want Aaron's job? No, not power. Better than power. Income. Who feeds the priests? No, come on, this is serious. Who feeds the priests? The people. Every sacrifice, the priests take a cut, literally. Every sacrifice, a priest takes the cut. So you are living on the dole of the community. This is a really nice, cushy job, right? I mean, you come to shul once a week, you eat at Kiddush, you go home the rest of the week and just play. You know, it's a cushy job we rabbis have, right? Right? Everybody wants this job. That's right. I'm going on vacation. What do I get? I know. I don't belong to I belong to the rabbinical assembly. Cushy job, right? Who needs this? You know, cushy. It's more than that. He wants the power. He wants the position. And he deserves it because he's older. His family has higher ranking in the tribe of Levi than does Moses, does Aaron, right? What? Because you know that if you look back at the genealogy, you'll see that that Itzar was Amram's older brother. Amram is the father of Moshe and Aaron, and Itzar is the father of Korach, so they're cousins. So this comes within the family, right? What do the Reubenites want? What's the claim of the tribe of, who is Reuven? He's the firstborn. So who should rule the Israelites? The Levites, who are the fourthborn, or the firstborn? And then when Moses retires, who's going to take his place? Joshua. Who is Joshua? What tribe does he come from? Ephraim. Who is Ephraim? Joseph. Who is Joseph? Yes, but more than that, he's the firstborn of Rachel. Who is Reuben? The firstborn of Leah, I told you, it all goes back to these wives. It's all their fault. Right? It's all the women's fault. Right? So there's this natural rivalry within the tribes about who gains primogeniture. Right? And then finally, you have 250 chieftains. What do they want? Well, they're tribal elders. What right do you have to rule when we're the tribal elders and we're the ones who ought to be ruling? So there's a serious question of authority in this community. And you told us we're going to be free. You told us that this whole project is about freedom. What's the nature of authority in an environment of freedom? Who rules? Who guides? This becomes a serious question. So this is the Torah portion that is by nature political. It's by nature political. Now, what happens in the tradition is quite remarkable because this opens a door, and if you look at the commentary at the bottom of the page, I don't often tell you to read it, but here they give you a nice tamtzit, a nice concentrated summary of the traditions of the Midrash. What's going to happen is the rabbis of the tradition, first of all, they hate Korach. They make him the worst guy. Because for them, anybody who's against Moses is a bad guy. And they're going to dump on him everything that's evil. He's jealous of Moses' authority. He's greedy for power. He's greedy for gain. But that's not the important part. What's really interesting is they're going to put in his mouth their own doubts. They're going to put in his mouth their own recognition that any legal system contains a certain quality of the arbitrary, and any religious system contains certain contradictions. For example, you have to put a mezuzah on a door. Every door has to have a mezuzah, right? Right. Good. What's in the mezuzah? There's a little parchment, and on that parchment is a shema, right? If you happen to have a mezuzah, no matter how beautiful and decorative and expensive it was, and it doesn't have a little parchment with the Shema inside, what do you have? A box, right? What do you call a boomerang that doesn't come back? A stick, right? What do you call a mezuzah without a parchment? A box, right? What makes it a mezuzah is it has a parchment with the words of Torah on it. So Korach asks the following question. In a library, where every shelf has a book of the Torah, do you need a mezuzah on the wall? Ooh. Everybody go, ooh. You're supposed to wear a tallis, and the tallis has fringes, and one of the fringes is blue. What if the whole tallis is blue? Does the fringe still have to be blue? Say, ooh. Right? Right? It's like the question, it's not here, but you would ask the question this way. If it's a vegan restaurant, does it still have to be deemed kosher? Ooh. You get the picture? Right? These are the contradictions that are, right? If you're on a fast, on a 36-day fast, do you still have to fast Yom Kippur, right? I mean, how do you make your Yom Kippur difference? If it's, you see these are all the arbitrary contradictions within a religious system, and the rabbis put that in the mouth of Korach because they make him the sort of bad boy. You know, they make him the bad boy, right? You all ask me this question all day. If chicken is fleshik, why are eggs pariv? Oh, come on, you know? And if chicken is fleshik, why should chicken be fleshik altogether? Because if you're thinking about an animal that gives milk and you can't give milk you can't boil the kid in its mother. Chickens don't give milk. How can chickens possibly be kosher? And so I said, well, you see, chicken looks a little bit like meat and you might make a difference. Okay, good. Then you say to me, then why not tuna fish? Tuna fish should be fleshiks also. And I say, give me a break. What am I going to eat? You know? I mean, you see, because there's these divisions, you know. And by the way, so I have friends who are like frum vegetarians. Do you have friends who are like frum vegetarian? I have friends who are like Chabad vegetarian, like Satmar vegetarian. You know, like they don't eat they don't eat asparagus because they think it's like conscious, you know, and kind, you know. So they get angry because kosher is fat. You know, you're still eating. and they don't understand. They point out all the contradictions in the system. That's what Korach does in the Midrash, right? In each generation, Korach becomes the sort of vessel for all of the internal rebelliousness of the tradition, because you'll see what happens to him at the end of the story. It's not pretty. Okay, you brought something?
Yeah,
Good.
exactly on this point.
Good. Good.
Precisely so.
I could see that.
Well, so I did some work at the beginning of my work on Jewish heretics, on people who got kicked out of Judaism. And in researching Korach, who's one of them, along with Lenny Bruce,
Spinoza, Maimonides,
Lilith,
and Lenny Bruce. Okay.
Uriel da Costa,
Jesus,
Paul.
Yeah, okay, good.
All right. So the thing is, the rabbis, Korach is a lens. You got that exactly right.
Right.
Everything else you said was not right, but that was right. That was right. But what is it a lens into? It's not just a lens into freedom, because this is a scam. The people are not getting, they're not free. They're not free. They're now slaves to the law. And the rabbis see that contradiction, exactly as you said. And so Korach is a lens to what the rabbis thought about Moses, which we can tell, first from the Haggadah, that there's no reference in a rabbinic creation of the principal actor of the Exodus. Moses' name is never there. So, and you mentioned the text exactly right, from Midrash on Psalms, which is the text, that's one that was not included, but it's about a widow who brings offerings, and Aaron continues to take these offerings and take them, and in the end, he takes her sheep and everything she had.
Right.
That's in Midrash. And then in...
Right, let me just describe that for a second. So another one of these rabbinic midrashim, where they attack this, they take all of the taxes and tithes and offerings that the people of Israel are obligated for. It sounds almost like a Republican campaign ad.
Yeah.
And they list them all. And they say, well, so once upon a time was a woman, and she had a farm, and she was growing fruit, and Aaron comes along and takes half of the fruit, and takes this tithe and that tithe. So she sold the farm and bought a sheep, and then Moses comes and takes it. And by the end, she has nothing, right? If you add up all of the obligations in the end, you end up with nothing. Again, it's the contradiction of the legal system, right?
And then the other ones you mentioned about the thread of blue.
Yeah.
Why isn't the talus with all blue threads kosher?
Right.
And the mezuzah in a house filled with books. But the final one, which is from Numbers Rabbi, is the most revealing. And it's rarely quoted because it's so explosive.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts out with the rabbi I quoted last week, Shmuel Bar Nachmani, but this is actually attributed to Shmuel ben Yitzchak in the name of Rav. So this is already high-level
Midrash, yeah.
stuff, and it's Tanaim.
Right.
So, which means the early rabbis, up to 200. And here's what they said. When Moses heard it, and what did he hear? Said in the name of it. It implies that everyone in the community suspected Moses of having adultery with a married woman. As may be inferred from the text, they were jealous. And they quote some citations for that. Shmuel bar Yitzchak in the name of Rav says, it implies that everyone suspected his wife of intercourse with Moses. That's Midrash. And that is what the rabbis thought about Moses. He was the great opponent to what they were recreating in Judaism. Not a Judaism in which authority is granted directly by God to the chosen one who sees the bush, but rather a meritocracy of scholars who use internal logic and Roman logic to develop law for the people. The opponent to this, the opposite of what Judaism turned into with the rabbis, was Moses. Moses was the opposite of everything they believed. They hated Moses, and in Korach, they got a voice box for their hatred.
You really think they hated Moses?
Oh,
Really?
they
Right.
hated him for the same reason that.
No, I understand. And so you hear what Rabbi, so Rabbi Gelman's argument is that the rabbis are creating a new system of law and a new religion following the destruction of the temple. It's a religion based on the interpretation of text, done by groups of scholars in consensus. Any guy who stands up and says, I have the truth, that God spoke to me and gave me the truth, any guy who produces miracles to show that he has the truth becomes an enemy of that system. Now, there's real competition between those two religious systems, because a guy who shows up and says, I have the truth, I have God on my side, follow me, my truth is the only authentic truth, has a certain kind of authority, has a certain kind of attraction to a population that's just suffered a terrible trauma, is very frightened and wants security. And the rabbi system, where it's all arguments, it can be somewhat disconcerting if you just say, I want the answer already. So they're trying to knock off Moses by elevating Korach. Did you see how that works? Okay? Let's turn it around just a slight bit. Let's go to your other question. Instead of looking at Korach as an enemy, which we will in a minute, we'll knock him off in a second. He gets his. It's every rabbi's dream. Let's think about for a moment the following. Let's think of him as a dissident. Here, what's interesting about Rabbi Gelman just listed all these people that he taught about. In Christianity, a church is held together by dogma, which means there's a certain core of beliefs that all of us share, and that's what gathers us together here at First Methodist, or First Lutheran, or 72nd Lutheran on 28th Avenue, whatever. And what happens is, when there is a schism, a break, and someone says, I don't agree with what you just said, what happens in Christianity is that the church breaks apart. First you had the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, and then you have the explosion of Protestant denominations, because each time you have a different interpretation of what Jesus would have you do, you have to leave the church and start another church. Right? That doesn't happen in Judaism. What happens in Judaism is, theoretically, is that we have enough solidarity communally to tolerate a much higher degree of dissent. A much higher degree of dissent. Now, you look around and you say, okay, but wait a minute, Rabbi, there's Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, because of all the others. True. That's true. But first of all, there aren't as many as there are Protestant denominations, right? And if you know Jews, there's 14 million Jews in the world, there should be 14 million synagogues, right? Actually, 28 million synagogues, because the one I wouldn't be caught dead in, Yeah, but the idea that we can tolerate within a community a very high degree of dissent, because what gathers us together are ties of family and community and history and solidarity, so that we can disagree with each other and still we can sit next to each other in a community. This is one of the features, the sociological features of Jewish communities. So, for example, the prophets were considered traitors and treasonous and blasphemers and heretics, and yet they're in the Bible. Okay? Among the rabbis, if you read the Talmud, this is why it's unfortunate that American Jews don't know as much Talmud, because in the Talmud, the differences among the rabbis were radical, and yet they maintained a sense of solidarity. You have Rabbi Akiva, you have Rabbi Yishmael, who says, Dibrat Torah b'lashon b'nei Adam. Torah is written in colloquial language. It says what you're supposed to say. It's easy to read. Then you have Rabbi Akiva, who says, no, Torah dibra b'lashon shamayim. Torah is written in divine language. Every word, every jot and tittle can be interpreted. Now, those are completely different religions, and yet they married each other, they lived in the same place, they shared life together. Remarkable. It's a remarkable thing that you can maintain communal solidarity under those circumstances. In the Middle Ages, we had this bad habit. We learned this from the non-Jews. We started excommunicating each other. But here's the great thing. Anyone who's ever been excommunicated by the Jews in one generation was venerated the next. So Maimonides was excommunicated, and he becomes the greatest the next generation. Spinoza is excommunicated, and he becomes the greatest. When Rabbi Schulweis, on his 90th birthday, if he had lived to be 90, I was working on this. I had a present for him. I was going to get him excommunicated. I was working on it. No, this is serious. I'll tell you why. Because what made Rabbi Schulweis, Harold Schulweis, graduated Yeshiva College, right, in June of 1945, 2 weeks after he graduated, a week and a half after he graduated. There was a news report in the New York Times, that a group of rabbis had met in the lobby of the McAlpin Hotel, June 11, 1945, and they burned Mordechai Kaplan's prayer book and excommunicated Mordechai Kaplan. And that's why Harold Schulweis decided to go to the Jewish Theological Seminary. Because he read about Kaplan in the New York Times, about Kaplan's, why they burned his prayer book. They burned his prayer book because he tried to create a contemporary prayer book. And Schulweis says, that's a guy I want to meet. And he became Kaplan's student for the rest of his life. Kaplan's excommunication is the reason why Schulweis became Schulweis and didn't stay at yeshiva and become an Orthodox rabbi. The Orthodox, by the way, give thanks for this, right? Because he'd have been a holy terror as an Orthodox rabbi, right? No, it's very interesting. So this was what Rabbi Schulweis most wanted. He wanted me to get him, and I was working on it, right? But the Orthodox today aren't what the Orthodox used to be, and they just don't do this anymore. It's just no fun. But the people that so there has always been a tradition of dissent within Judaism, and it's very important to us. Because what do the dissenters say? The dissenters say what Korach says. Take seriously what you say. What did Korach say? Look at Korach's line. Go look at the beginning of Korach's line. What did Korach say? Korach said, right? Page 861. You have gone too far. Rav Lachem, which is really ironic, because Rav Lachem means like you're a bunch of rabbis, right? It means you're too great. For all the community are holy, all of them, and the Lord is in their midst. Why do you raise yourselves above the congregation? Come in and sit down. We got lots of room. Come on. Very dangerous to be standing while a rabbi talks. You could doze off and pass out and hurt yourself. Come in. Does anybody recognize those words? Does anybody recognize those words? What does he say? Right? All the community are holy. Where did he hear that? Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai. You will be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Right? All of them. The Lord is in their midst. Build me a sanctuary. Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. I will live in your midst. Right? And, right, all of them. And what did Moses say when he was told that Eldad and Medad were prophesying in the congregation, in the community last week? He said, what? He said, let everybody be a prophet. Korach is just repeating back our own words. And he's saying, I take them seriously. This is what the dissenters do. The dissenters say, I take you more seriously than you do. One second. I take you more seriously than you do. It's very important to understand this. That there's enough room in Judaism for dissent. There's room for a Maimonides. There's room for an Elisha ben Abuya. There's room for a Spinoza. There's room for a Lenny Bruce. Right? There's room for these people because what they said, the Hasidim. Anyone here? Like today when you think of Hasidim, you think of ultra-Orthodox guys with long black coats and long black beards. 2-3 generations ago, my Lithuanian ancestors threw them in jail because they were blasphemers and heretics. Shneur Zalman of Ladi, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, was put into Cherem by the Vilna Gaon. If that sentence doesn't mean anything to you, I'll translate it. The founder of Hasidism was deemed a heretic by the leading Orthodox rabbi of the day. Okay? Next time you see a Chabadnik, just tell him. No, but you understand what that means. Because in the next generation, they became allies. Because the Orthodox realized that Chabad was onto something, because Chabad was asking a question that the Orthodox tradition wasn't asking, which is, what is the quality of your inner life? And the Lithuanian rabbinic tradition then instituted a movement called Musar, which is the equivalent of Hasidism for Litvaks. It's an inner movement, inner spirituality movement for the yeshiva students and congregations. In other words, in each generation, we embraced the heretic because the heretic told us something about ourselves that we needed to know.
Well, almost.
Yes. Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
There is a point beyond which they cannot be embraced.
Yeah, that's true.
Paul
But you got to
was
wait
a
a while.
Jewish heretic,
Yeah.
but he moved too far.
Yeah, but see, but Paul did. But Matthew, on the other hand, not so much. I mean, Matthew asks a question about law. Paul went too far because he rejected law altogether.
Yes.
Matthew asked the same question about law that the Hasidim asked, which is, how does the your external performance of halacha, of law, affect your inner life? How does what good does it do for you to keep kosher dishes but treif speech? That was a question that Matthew's Jesus asked. That's a damn good question. It's a question that the later tradition, the rabbinic tradition, is going to take up with some rigorousness. So what we have here is Korach represents a dissenter. We love dissenter. We need dissenters. Now, they're a pain in the ass, believe me. They're a pain in the neck. No one wants to be told you're not taking your own tradition seriously enough. No one wants to be told, here's a whole different way of looking at it. No one wants to be told, but that's part of the process. So the process was described best by Martin Buber, who was himself a dissenter, and he didn't get into cherem because no one took him seriously enough in the religious world because he was such a heretic, right? Buber was a great Zionist, a great religious philosopher, and in many, many ways a great Jew, but completely against all the forms of Judaism. He was so much against the forms, the observances, the performance of law. He had a student at the Hebrew University, a brilliant young student named Ernst Simon. And Ernst Simon was a very observant Jew. I know him because I studied with his son, Uriel. And Uriel told us this story, that Buber was such a schmuck. Buber would call Simon 1 minute before Shabbat and let the phone ring. Like 100 times, because he was making fun of his student who was observant and wouldn't pick up the telephone, and that was Buber. But that was because Buber was just. Why did you share that? Because Buber had this in him. But here's Buber's idea. Buber says religion. He says he offers two beautiful words: religion and religiosity. What is religiosity? Religiosity is what young people today call spirituality. It is a personal experience of the absolute. It's the mystical experience. It's what Heschel describes. Oh, wow. It's religious experience. People have these experiences and they want to hold on to them because they're generally ephemeral. So you create symbols and rituals in order to hold on to them. And that's what religion is. Religion is freeze-dried religiosity. But you see what happens is religion then becomes rigid. It becomes rigid. And somebody has to come along and smash it with new religiosity. And the balance, the tension, the sort of pendulum between religion and religiosity is what keeps a religion alive. If you rely too much on religion, it becomes dead. It's just performance. It's just observance without any heart. But you can't have only religiosity because you can't live in that ecstasy all the time. It has to be a pendulum between the two. But that means there has to be somebody in the community, a lot like Korach, saying, what? Here's a different way. So my friend David's here. David, in music, it's the same thing, right? Absolutely. You have musical geniuses who create new ways of doing music, and that becomes the way everybody does music, right?
Well,
and then someone comes along and blows it up.
What I'm thinking of is at the very beginning you mentioned the road, and you mentioned the yellow brick road, and all the lyrics to The Wizard of Oz were written by Yip Harber, whose first language was Yiddish. And he was actually raised in a Yiddish home in New York. But the last line in The Wizard of Oz, when the wizard is found out, and Toto
Yeah.
reveals the man behind the curtain, and he's embarrassed, and Dorothy is traumatized. The wizard finally confers a medal on the lion and a heart to the Tin Man. And when he gives the Tin Man a heart, he says a heart is not judged by how much you love, but by how much you are loved by the others.
Oh, nice.
And that line, as a kid, we all understand it, but as an adult, it means something else.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think there's a lot of meaning in that.
yeah. I like the line he gives to the scarecrow. He says, I know men who know nothing, no more than you, but they call themselves professors. But they have something that you don't have, right?
And he said, the scarecrow says, now I'm a doctor of Thin College.
Yes. Because in philosophy, there's such thing as a straw man, you know? So he says, now you have a diploma. Every time I go to a graduation, I think of that line, right? I know men who have no more in their heads than you have, but they have something you don't have, a diploma, right? Okay, so what I'm suggesting is that in all forms of culture, this alternation, this pendulum between form and revolution has to exist. Otherwise, you freeze it and it becomes a dead culture. But in religion, you call this religion and religiosity, and this is the function of the dissident. The dissident shows up and says, let's go back to the core and understand what it really meant. What does it demand of us? And blows up the forms in order to allow new life to enter. You know, they say you have to have a forest fire once in a while for new trees to grow. But that means there has to be an act of destruction for new life to come in. And that's very painful and very difficult. But that's how new life enters into the system. And that's what the Jewish people have always been genius at. So that whole list of people that Rabbi Gelman taught about, because we've always welcomed these dissidents. We hate them in the moment, but the next generation we venerate them, we make them saints, because they bring us new perspectives. All right, Douglas, and then somebody's over here, I see.
I think you're reading something in Torah.
Of course I am. I'm a rabbi. I'm paid to read things.
When you look at what he says,
Right.
you know, when you say Kiddushim Tiyu, you have the capacity to be holy.
Yeah.
And he's saying we are holy.
Yeah, so there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
Right, there's a big difference there, which is why the rabbis saw him as a demagogue, right? The rabbis saw him as a demagogue because instead of understanding this as a dynamic process, that holiness is your aspiration, something to reach for, something that I acknowledge I'm not yet. He says you are holy. And the difference between you are holy and the license that gives you and the idea that you are reaching toward holiness, right? Without getting political, it's the difference between saying we are reaching toward greatness as a nation and we are a great nation. When you say we are a great nation, the next thing you say is anything we do is therefore by definition great, right? And therefore I have to support anything that we do, right? If I say we're reaching toward greatness, I can say, well, that last thing we did, that was not in the path of greatness. That took us backwards, right? And what's worse is to say, make us great again. Because that says we were once great, and we somehow lost it, and now we have to go find it again. And it imagines an ideal past where greatness existed, right? And you idealize that past, right? And you say, well, we were great back then because, you know, and that moves you backwards, not forward. So it's a wonderful drasha, and if you wait another 15 minutes and come into the shul, you're going to hear it. Okay? I predict.
One more example. In modern times.
Yeah.
Benny Morris, when he wrote his first histories of the 1948 war,
Right.
he was excoriated as, you know, as being anti-Jewish
Yeah.
and hating the
Yeah,
Israel.
yeah.
And he's now become the gold standard as to the origin story of the nation of Israel.
Well, not quite the gold standard, but that revisionist history came in. What Douglas is talking about is that for many years we told certain stories about how Israel was founded. And then there was a group of revisionist historians in the 90s who said, listen, it ain't necessarily so. That we were brutal in many cases. If you read Ari Shavit's book, My Promised Land, that famous third chapter about Lod is part of that revision history, right? And now Israelis are able to say, yeah, we did some terrible, horrible things to the Palestinians. That doesn't deny the legitimacy of our statehood, but we have to recognize who and what we were. You know, and that kind of realistic recognition instead of mythic kind of thing, that's important for a growth of a country. At the same time, I would argue, that you can't lose mythic history. I think one of the great things that we've lost in America is a sense of the mythic quality of our ancestors. I mean, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, these were, for all of the revisionist history, they were great men. And they did great things, and we should recognize their greatness in a realistic way, right? If you just trash everybody and say nobody was great, you're a bereft nation as well.
But so was Ben Gurion.
Yeah.
And so that origin story was able to hold it up, except Shavit's, the historical accuracy of that.
Well, that's questionable, but the revisionist history have been accepted in Israel because now we can say, yeah, we did some terrible things. Yeah, and we're sorry we did them, but it doesn't delegitimize the state. That's important to know. All right, someone over here had a hand up. Yeah.
The scene where Korach says you have gone too far.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at what happened just before that when they killed this guy for gathering wood on Shabbat.
Yeah, they killed it. I think more than that is the whole thing with the spies. When Moses condemns the people to die in the desert, we're not going to enter the land. You're all going to die in the desert. That would seem to me to occasion a rebellion, wouldn't you think?
I think he did go too far.
Yeah. I mean that, and the question is, what authorizes you to make these decisions? This becomes a very serious question. Yes, Stephen.
Quick question. When you said that
No.
we don't break apart.
Well, we try not to.
No,
Put it
no.
that way.
But what about? Is it the Karaites or somebody? Who
Karaites. Yeah.
Believe in the Torah. Forget the Talmud.
Yeah.
We're leaving.
Yeah.
But the majority though became. Well, no,
There have been, over the course of Jewish history, small groups of people who had very different beliefs and remained somehow connected to the Jewish people, but somehow separate. One of the most famous is a group called the Karaites. The Karaites rejected the Talmudic tradition and created their own their own interpretive tradition, and have their own ways of observing Torah. So they're sort of semi-Jewish, semi-not. Right? There are other kinds of groups like this as well, right? I was going to once give a class called The Joy of Sects, right? About all of these different groups, because there's a number of them, and some you haven't heard. There's the Sabbateans, the ones who think that Shabtai Tzvi really was the Messiah, right? There's that group. There's a bunch of these different interesting groups around, right? Right now, without casting aspersions, there's a small group within Chabad that thinks that the Rebbe is the Mashiach. Right, so the 23rd yahrzeit of the Rebbe was celebrated this week, but this group doesn't celebrate his yahrzeit. They celebrate he's coming back. There's a huge poster on a wall in Jerusalem as you drive up to Jerusalem with a picture of the Rebbe, and it says, Baruch haba Melech Mashiach, which means welcome King Messiah, and it's his picture, and they think he's coming. He's going to somehow land in Lod from heaven, and he's going to drive up the guy. He'll get caught in traffic, that's for sure. That road is murder 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he'll see the poster, and maybe he'll stop at the McDonald's or something. But so these are these small groups of interesting Jews. But typically that's not. Typically what happens is we have our internal rivalries and our internal struggles, and then a generation later, well, look, what was the greatest heresy of Jewish modernity was Zionism. The greatest heresy of the greatest rebellion was Zionism. You mean to tell me that you are going to pick yourself up, go to the land of Israel, declare a Jewish state, speak Hebrew, make Shabbos the weekend, keep the Jewish holidays, and you're not going to wait for Messiah to do that? Are you kidding me? There is no Orthodox Jew in the world who should do that. That's heresy. And in one generation, that's what happened. All of these kids left Eastern European yeshivas, and they went to Eretz Yisrael, and their fathers and mothers sat shiva for them. Honest to God, they sat shiva. Because they're heretics. They left the fold. They left tradition. They blasphemed. They broke the covenant. And a generation later, if you say you don't believe in the state of Israel, you're a heretic in the American Jewish community. You stand up in shul, in my shul, and you declare you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the Torah, you're not going to listen to rabbis, you're not going to pray, nothing will happen to you except the person sitting behind you will ask you to move over. They'd like to hear the bar mitzvah. You stand up in pretty much any American synagogue and you say you don't believe in the state of Israel, it should be given to the Arabs, they will kill you with their pocketbooks before you hit the door. They will beat you to death. They will stone you with Kiddush wine and Kiddush cookies, right? Because being a Zionist today is a defining characteristic of being a Jew. But a generation ago, Rabbi Shulweiss told this story. He was part of a Zionist club. He had a Zionist lapel pin. When his Zeta saw that, his Zeta was a Talmud teacher, his Zeta ripped it off of his lapel and said, never in my house. Because Zeta was a traditional Jew, and traditional Judaism says you wait for Mashiach. Come on. Heresy. One generation's heretics becomes the next generation's saints. What happened to Korach? Well, I'll give you a hint. We'll see what happened to him in the Torah, but I got to tell you, there's a whole bunch of Psalms that are Mizmor Libnei Korach. He comes back. But one generation's heretic becomes the next generation's inspiration. That's the dynamic. Myra, and then Gloria, and then we're going to finish the text and make Kiddush.
46
Kaddish.
years ago, Korach was my bat mitzvah party.
Mazel tov, mazel
Don't
tov.
do the math, it won't come up.
Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov.
What I learned from that Torah reading
Yeah,
was you can disagree, but
yeah.
not become disagreeable. And that's why your Parsha
Yeah.
interpretation from AJU yesterday was so brilliant.
Yes, it was brilliant.
That was Korach's
It's still
mission,
brilliant.
was it to become holier and get to God and to heaven
That's one-
for personal gain only.
Well, see, the question is, what the Torah, here's the thing, this is what someone said, Brian said before. The Torah doesn't tell you what Korach's problem was. He becomes a vessel for what we want him to be. Okay, that's exactly the point. So he's an invitation for interpretation. Okay, Gloria, hi.
Okay.
I can barely see.
I want to go back to,
I want to bury Korach yet. Wait.
okay, Douglas's point about holy.
Good.
So, B'Tselem Elohim.
Yeah.
We're created B'Tselem Elohim.
Yeah.
Is that in itself not a condition of holy, or is holy an action, a verb?
Oh, see, that's a great question. That's worth a whole morning. See, it's interesting that Tselem Elohim doesn't come back in the Torah anyplace. Right? It's never mentioned again. But Kedusha is mentioned. And here Kedusha, if you look at, if you have a moment, go back at 693. Right? Kedoshim Tihiyu. Tihiyu means you will become. You will reach for holiness. And then what?
In B'Tselem Elohim.
Well, you could. I mean, that's what Rabbi Shulweiss always taught us. You could always see Kedusha. I think it has other things. It means other things. But the idea is that it's a dynamic and it's an aspiration. It moves forward. It's pulling you towards something higher, right? It's not what you are. It's what you have the potential to become.
So what I'm thinking as you're saying,
So there's no such thing. One great psychologist, Gordon Allport, once wrote a book where he said, there's no such thing as human being. There's only human becoming. Right? Because no one is born human. Right? Least of all, if you look at a child, the child's not human. Child's like helpless, and the child doesn't. You spend a lifetime learning to be human. Kedoshim Tihiyu. Humanity is something you reach for, because you're the only creature in the world that's not finished. You're a self-creating creature. That aspiration. That's the core of Torah. And when Korach comes and says you are holy, that's a very different statement. That's chauvinism. Because if I am holy, I don't have to reach for anything. I can be what I am, and whatever I do is okay. Right? I'm okay, you're okay was a great book in the 1970s. Right? So people would step on your foot, and you'd say, excuse me, and he'd say, I'm okay. I mean, no, seriously, there's a sense of moral license that comes with this, right? Right? No Jew ever said that, because all of us have Jewish mothers who said, you're not okay, Do your homework, comb your hair, stop eating French fries, right? I mean, that's the psychological function of Jewish guilt. I'm not okay, I'm growing. Let's finish Korach. Ready? We're on page 863. This is a beautiful statement, right? So Moses says to Korach, tomorrow you guys appear before the Lord. Each of you take his fire pan, right? So they took the fire pan. Then the presence of the Lord appeared to the whole community. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, staying back from this community, I'll annihilate them in an instant. God says, I'm going to kill them all. God has a funny attitude about, what's that, kill them all, sort them out later. It's like, just one flash. He just wants to get rid of it. This is the Noah. It's like what he did at the world with Noah. Just, who needs these people? Kill them all. I'll start over again with you guys. Moses says, no. God, source of breath of all flesh, when one man sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community? So where's Moses? Between an angry God and a sinful population. And it's the sinful population that just made his life holy hell, but he's defending them against an angry God. You see where he stands? That's a hell of a place to be. Defending people you can't stand. Taking care of people you can't stand. But he knows he has to do it, because if he don't do it, God's going to just burn them all up. Right? Because what is God? God is the unyielding idealist. And the unyielding idealist doesn't want to deal with people like this. This is Stalin. This is Mao. This is every idealist who sees a vision of how the world ought to be. And when people don't get in line, just kill them. Just get rid of them. Just stuff them in, right? This is the idealist. And this is what the book of Numbers is all about. You can't be that idealist in the world. That's not the way we change. That's not the way you free a people. It can't be all or nothing. So what does Moses do? Moses stands between this angry idealist God and the people who have just rebelled against him. And he defends them. So the Lord spoke and says, okay, you don't want me to kill them all? We'll just kill the guys in charge. Speak to the community, the board of directors. We're going to kill the board of directors. We're going to save the shul by killing the board of directors. I apologize to any of you who are a synagogue leader in this room. Speak to the community and say, withdraw from the abode of Korach, Datan, and Abiram. So Moses wrote and went to Datan and Abiram, the elders, and he said, move away from the tents of these wicked men and touch nothing that belongs to them, lest you be wiped out for their sins. So they withdrew from the abode of Korach, Datan, and Abiram. Datan and Abiram had come out, and they stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives and children and little ones. And the Lord said, by this you will know it was God who sent me to do these things. They're not of my own devising. If these men die as all men do, if their lot be the common fate of all men, it was not the Lord who sent me. But if the Lord brings about something unheard of, so the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive to Sheol, that's death, then you'll know that these men have spurned the Lord. Scarcely had he finished speaking all these words when the ground under them burst asunder, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and all their households, all Korach's people, and all their possessions, and they went alive, down alive into Sheol, and all that belonged to them. The earth closed over, and they vanished from the midst of the congregation. Every rabbi wants to do that just once. You just get up at a board meeting and you tap the ground 3 times with your staff and you say, Lord God, if these people die the way that everyone dies, then my life is wasted. But if let the earth open, I'll swallow them up, right? And this is every leader's fantasy. Do you think that Trump prays this every night? Right? Tap the earth 3 times and all the Democrats in Congress get swallowed alive. And as long as you're down there, take Lindsey Graham and John McCain and Chuck Grassley and this guy Heller in Nevada. Take them too. Take Ted Cruz. Take Mike Lee. Hell, take all of Congress. Who needs it anyway? Take half of the Supreme Court. This is every leader's. Isn't this every leader's fantasy? This is a fantasy. It's a fantasy. It's a silly fantasy. It is the fantasy. Why is it a fantasy? Because life doesn't happen like this. You have to deal with ideas that are different than your own and perspectives that are different than your own. And if you're really a leader, what's your job? Your job is not to bury these people. Your job is to teach them. Your job is to lead them. Your job is to educate them. This is a horrible failure on Moses' part. This is the equivalent of killing the Egyptian back in Egypt. He could have stopped him just by telling him stop. But he lost his mind and he kills the guy. And here he loses his mind and kills all these people. And kills them. This is a terrible, terrible failure. It's a fantasy, but it's a terrible failure. And he's going to realize it soon.
Why do we venerate him?
Who? Well, Mark says they don't. That's the point. But because this is our drama. Because doesn't every leader want this to happen? You know?
But Moses doesn't do this, it's God.
Well, Moses says it. He calls the shot. It's just like Babe Ruth, calling the shot. He says, if these guys die the normal way, then you know I'm a fake. But if the earth opens up and swallows them alive, and scarcely had he finished speaking, and I mean, he could have had a Tyrannosaurus come and eat them or something. That'd have been like, Spielberg-esque,
This, though, God speaking through Moses, showing that this is God's
Yeah.
will?
This is.
Did I miss something here?
No, but this is Moses' God, but this is a terrible failure. What are you supposed to do for people? You're supposed to teach people. You can't do this.
It's God's failure.
Yes, of course it's God's failure. It's everybody's failure. It's our failure. This is the failure of community to embrace the dissident and find a place for the dissident. That's exactly the problem. And if you do this, what do you end up with? You end up with who's going to ever disagree with Moses now? If Moses orders eggs for breakfast, who's going to tell him to order oatmeal? You're afraid that the earth will open up and kill you. I mean, you can't say anything. How'd you like to be his wife? Your tie's on crooked. No, don't kill me. Right? The salad dressing on your shirt. Don't kill me. Right? You can't live this way. You can't lead this way. You can fantasize this all you want, but you can't lead this way. How do you have to lead? You got to teach people. And it's slow. That's what God doesn't understand. It takes a long time.
But we follow that God.
No, we don't follow. This God is learning. We are learning. Moses is learning. This is a book. You're on the road, my darling. God's on the road too. God is on the road too, and God is learning. And by the end of the book, God is actually going to learn, which is why you got to come back in September. Because in September, we're going to open Deuteronomy, and we're going to see if God has finally learned. I want to wish everybody a good Shabbos. If you'll stay just a moment, Brother Doug would like to say Kaddish for his grandmother. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemeh. Amen. Ve'almad rachutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agalau v'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba v'barach le'olam u'mei u'mah.